Hello, Alt-Centrism Central viewers. This is Peyton, and today we are starting a new series, Alt-Centrism Interviews, where we will be interviewing politicians, activists, and experts in their field on ongoing topics they care about. Our first guest is journalist, entrepreneur, transhumanist Zoltan Istvan, who is running for the Libertarian Party's vice presidential nomination, ran for president as a Republican and a Libertarian, and ran for governor in 2018. Zoltan, how are you doing today?
I'm doing good. Thanks for having me on.
Yep, no problem at all. So first, I wanted to ask you, what made you decide to run for the vice presidential nomination of the Libertarian Party?
Well, I had ran for governor in California in 2018 under the Libertarian Party, and I've also sort of always been a libertarian-minded person, especially since I published my libertarian book, The Transhumanist Wager. It's a novel, really with a lot of libertarian value in it. So it made a lot of sense, but I didn't feel that I was qualified to be their presidential candidate. But they independently nominate their vice presidential candidate, so you don't have to partner with somebody to be in the game. And so I thought, hey, this is a great place to run and see if somebody might think I could be a good vice presidential candidate serving underneath them.
All right. And before you were running for vice presidential nomination, I know you ran for the presidential nomination for the Libertarian Party, but then you switched to the Republican Party and ran for their presidential nomination. What made you switch to the Republican Party and then back to the Libertarian Party in this cycle?
Well, to be totally fair and honest, I got an enormous amount of media attention running as a Republican for the presidency. In fact, I got sixth overall in the race. That Donald Trump, of course, won the nomination, or will still win it. But the point was that we were covered by major media. That's 3-4 month run as a Republican dramatically. Now, since I've been running as a vice presidential candidate, there's been very little mainstream news coverage, and that's just because they don't pay attention to libertarians. So, frankly, if you would like to really make a name for yourself in order to even get the coverage in the first place and rise up and have a public profile, you sort of have to run with the big parties because it's just very difficult. The mainstream media doesn't want to cover third parties. So a lot of why I ran with the Republicans was to try to teach them about transhumanism, to kind of introduce that entire party to a candidate who was running that way. But the reality is that I'm not really a very good Republican, was never really bound to the conservative faith per se, and have always been much more libertarian. But, we got, 30 million views from that 3-4 month run. So I got to say it was pretty productive in that sense in terms of raising my public profile to be able to make other runs later and maybe one day win.
All right. As you know, the nomination is set for this upcoming weekend, Memorial Day weekend, in an online convention. How do you feel about your chances in securing the nomination moving forward?
Well, sadly, I don't think they're very good at all. My chance of winning the vice presidential nomination had a lot to do with having a physical vote. And the reason is because the convention, normally when it's physical, takes place over a 5-year period, and you have 48 hours before to meet the 1,000 delegates per se, and actually shake their hand and say, look, I'm your man. I'm your guy that can do this, and I'll be a great support for whichever presidential candidate. But without that, you have had to have met them all ahead of time, or they have all had to like you. And of course, researching you on the internet is kind of difficult because, mostly what I'm known for is as a transhumanist, sort of one of the leaders of the movement, and as a journalist who writes a lot about that. That's not going to go that well with the Libertarian Party. However, if they meet you in person, then they can see, oh, wait a second, here's a guy, this is what he looks like. He's eloquent, he's articulate, he can kind of move the ball forward for the Libertarian Party. I was counting on that physical convention. So, unfortunately, I don't think my chances are too good right now, just because I think an online voting base, people are probably going to go to familiar names, even if they don't have as strong of a national profile as I might.
All right. Now, to speak specifically about the presidential nomination for the Libertarian Party, have you or do you plan to endorse a specific candidate for the presidential nomination, or are you remaining neutral on that?
Well, I'm definitely remaining neutral on that right now. We never know what's going to happen, how it's going to unfold, if I would join a campaign to support or maybe even play a part in it. Mm-hmm. So I'm going to withhold that until probably the end. And I'm certainly not going to endorse any candidate right now unless somebody came to me and said, let us run together. But so far that has not happened. So right now I'm just, I think whoever the party nominates is whoever the party nominates, and as vice president, your job is to serve that presidential candidate, period. And that's what I would aim to do if I became the nominee, regardless of who I might prefer. But right now I'm not publicly going with who I prefer.
All right. And if you won the nomination, do you think any of the current presidential candidates you wouldn't be able to work with, or think you would have a tough time working with? Or do you not have a particular opinion about them right now?
I think the main ones are all pretty good, and frankly, I know almost all of them as well. I mean, I know Adam Kokesh and Vermin Supreme pretty well, and I also know John McAfee very well. I know he's kind of playing both sides there between. So I frankly, I know everybody and I'm friendly with everybody. So I think I could work under anyone. Again, I see this almost as a job. You are working to spread libertarian values, to spread the message of that presidential candidate, as well as upholding the Libertarian Party's message. And I'm a foot soldier, and even if I was vice presidential candidate, that's how I see it.
All right, and my next question is, if you don't win the nomination, though, will you endorse the nominees of the party and work with the party for success in 2020?
That's hard to know right now as well, but the answer is likely yes at this point. I'm not the biggest fan right now of either of the two gentlemen who are currently running, who are currently going to be the nominees for president. But we got to see. There's always an independent that can still show up and do this, and we also have to see who might get coronavirus, who might pass away. Mm-hmm. It's a long road down. It's a long way down the road. I can tell you that I almost certainly wouldn't support Mike Pence just because I think that person would be very bad for science should he end up the president. You know what I mean? But at the same time, I'm still leaning towards supporting the Libertarian presidential nomination, no matter what happens at this point in time. But I do want to see who it is. I also want to see how their campaign unfolds. Make sure that they stick to their values and don't. The idea is that whoever the candidate is, you want to make the libertarian movement stronger. And if they can do that, then they've done a good job. If they maybe do something bad and bring the ball backwards, that shows really poorly upon the entire party. So I feel like you have to let these things unfold, and it's a decision you make in early November.
Mm-hmm. You previously mentioned a little bit talking about the in-person versus the online convention. There's been a lot of controversy in the party about this because there's like you brought up, there's a lot of people who have brought up the risk that it's a little harder to campaign with the delegates when you can't meet them beforehand. Do you see the online convention as something that is going to be a mistake for the Libertarian Party, or do you think it's like a worthy compromise? Because a lot of people are worried about ballot access if we don't nominate the presidential nominee as soon as possible.
Yeah, this is a really tough question, and I'm basically split on it. But if I had to vote, people had pushed me to the edge, I probably would have said, look, even though it's against my best interest, I would have probably said a virtual conference is the best way to go. And the only reason is that if you want the Libertarian presidential candidate and VP to be taken seriously, it is all about ballot access. And so ballot access becomes an enormous priority in terms of spreading liberty values. Perhaps to me as much as important as who the candidate is in itself. And that's just the fundamental principle of how the American politics work. So, but again, I don't want to say any way that I fully support the virtual online thing. Like I said, it's bad for me. And if I go that way, it's only 51 to 49%. I'm barely tilted towards it. But I do realize the rationality of getting ballot access so that in November, the Libertarian presidential candidate ends up on a lot of television screens and liberty message moves forward.
Mm-hmm. So I kind of want to ask you some more specifics about your run specifically, more of how you, if you got the nomination, how you would go forward. Kind of what is your campaign strategy, or you think is the winning strategy that libertarians should adopt going into this presidential election?
Well, I think libertarians really need to break out of their message of liberty. I think, while I understand it, that it's kind of a heartfelt part of their core philosophy, it just simply, after almost 50 years, or maybe 50 years now, the party has existed, it's not working in becoming a major factor in American politics. So the libertarians have to look outside of their core values and start saying, where else can we use a libertarian philosophy and move the ball forward? And of course, I support a tax-free, bipartisan, libertarian-oriented universal basic income, and I have for a long time. It monetizes the $200 trillion of federal land out there, provides a basic income for every single American. It's very libertarian at its core because it doesn't raise taxes, and the ultimate result of it will be taking back land from the American government and putting it into the hands of the people, which is our birthright. And it will probably end up shrinking government. And yet, many libertarians seem to think, he supports a universal basic income, he's some socialist. And it's like, that's not the case at all. America has taken $200 trillion worth of federal land from its people and left it out there to do nothing, while we have a ton of homeless problems, a ton of, we have a coronavirus dilemma that's killing our economy. We have poverty. We can use this federal land, which belongs to people, to monetize it. And this is the kind of idea that I believe the Libertarian Party could take. It stays very strongly within its ideals of less government and all these other things, because in the end of the day, it will shrink government. It'll probably get rid of food stamps and then help, Social Security maybe can go away. It could provide all these things. It could definitely shrink the government. And yet libertarians won't get behind it because of a word, universal, or a couple words, universal basic income. I think the Libertarian Party needs to really take these brand new ideas that some of the younger people are bringing to the party and say, if they are libertarian at their core, let's run with it. And this is a libertarian idea to restore stolen land to the American people who could then utilize it. And, I think these would be the major ideas that could lift Libertarian Party out of its kind of doldrums. And yet, everybody, almost when I talk to, like 90% of libertarians are like, arr! And that's just their lack of vision to say, where is libertarianism going to be in the future? What about the age when automation comes, when robots do most jobs? How does libertarianism and laissez-faire capitalism survive? And these are places where the Libertarian Party could make a stand, be very different than the Democrats and the Republican parties, and yet they refuse to do so, and they just simply don't gain any voters.
Mm-hmm. I'm actually glad you brought up the universal basic income, because two candidates have kind of gotten, well, one of them dropped out, Justin Amash, have gotten backlash because of supporting what a lot of libertarians feel are universal basic incomes. The first being Judge Jim Gray, who him and Larry Sharp in their run support a negative income tax, which to most libertarians is just like a UBI. And then Amash, when he said that he would support a UBI as long as this coronavirus is going on to, help Americans through this crisis. So I wanted to ask you if you think that this outrage by libertarians towards things they view as not part of their principles, do you think that hurts the party, or do you think it's important that the party remain by its principles?
I think the party should not remain. Well, first off, it's not really a question of the party remaining by its principles. A negative income tax or a federal land dividend, I think a federal land dividend is quite a bit better, is not stepping outside the boundaries of the party's core beliefs. There's a lot of different things that the party could do that are incredibly libertarian-minded, and yet don't follow exactly the party line. The world is changing. Technology is changing. Society is changing. And Libertarian Party ideals also have to change with that in order to grow the movement and get the most liberty that we can to the greatest amount of people. And that doesn't mean that we're compromising our values. And that's really where, I hate to say it, and I wrote an article about this for the Daily Caller, that libertarians are total fanatics, and they have no sense of compromise. And I don't mean this, every one of them is, but certainly there needs to be some balance, some professionalism, and some compromise built into the system. It doesn't mean that you're giving up your liberty beliefs. It just means that you're enlarging your libertarian perspective to accommodate a few other things in order to gain more liberties. Now, if the Libertarian Party actually wants to get any elected members, into the House, Congress, places like that, and I don't mean someone like Justice Amash who switches, I mean like starts off, then they're going to have to open themselves up to I don't even like using the word compromise. It's just enlarging your libertarian scope, your libertarian, scope of field kind of thing, where it's just a bigger picture of libertarian values.
Yeah, definitely. And another question I had for you is, right now, obviously, there's a pandemic going on with coronavirus, and a lot of libertarians are split on the issue. They're split on whether or not they support the lockdown. Should we reopen? What is your stance on the whole coronavirus issue? What should be done?
Well, I have, and a great controversy. I have not supported the lockdown whatsoever from day one. I thought it's an absolutely awful idea. I'll go as far as saying it's an evil idea. It's one of the very first times I've seen. I've just been almost embarrassed to be a human being. First off, my wife's a surgeon, so I know right on the front lines of all this. I mean, I'm also an expert in a public figure in the science and technology world, so I'm also on the front lines to that. We should have adopted the Swedish model. We should have said, look, there is a pandemic. It's terrible. Unfortunately, these things happen on planet Earth. Let us practice social distancing. Let us have a few little rules that make it so that we can kind of not spread it as quickly as possible. But the bottom line is we should be spending all our time and effort on, and less red tape and less bureaucracy on getting a vaccine into trials. But let us not destroy the economy, because as you probably have been reading now, there now might be 130 million people around the world that face starvation. There's upticks in suicide. There's upticks in all sorts of other people dying from strokes and heart disease, because no one will go to the hospitals anymore because they're all too afraid. There are ramifications when you drop the GDP of the world by 1%. And those ramifications are that millions of people more will die because they either are hungry, don't have shelter, or loss of resources. There's divorce increases. There's domestic violence abuses. There's a whole bunch of things that we've done by stopping our economy in order to try to save some older people who are very close to dying anyways, or at least just a few years away, as well as medically, immunocompromised people. Don't get me wrong, in no way do I want anyone to die, and I would love to protect everyone. But this is a war, and we need people that make rational and sound decisions for the greater good of society. And I have already predicted, and I know this for a fact, that many more people will die through the ramifications of shutting down the economy than will die from the coronavirus. But more importantly, to me, as a transhumanist, we have stopped approximately 200,000 medical science experiments that were also going to be contributing towards people living dramatically longer in the future. And we had to stop them because that's what the coronavirus quarantine did. It shut down the world. So when you stop medical experiments, it means people down the road in the future also will live a lot less because those medical experiments didn't come to fruition quick enough. I mean, look at Harvard University's budget is being cut by something like 30%. What do you think happens to Harvard University's medical system when that happens? The research stops. That means people later down the road won't live as long because we didn't get the cure for cancer then, and we didn't get the new cure for Alzheimer's. So we should never have stopped the economy so hard stop. I wish we would have gone with the Swedish model. Yes, some extra people would have died, but just see how many people are going to die now and how many many tens of millions, 500 million people perhaps are going to enter into poverty as a result of this hard quarantine that we put around the globe.
Well, I thank you. That's all the questions I have for you. I thank you for joining us and giving us this opportunity to interview you. I wish you luck in your run for the vice presidential nomination, and I hope you have a great day.
Well, thank you so much for having me on, and I'll look forward to hearing this when it's out. Thank you.
All right, no problem. You have a nice day.
You too. Bye-bye now.